Night in the Tian Shan Mountains arrives like an ice blade cutting across the horizon. And when the sun disappears behind peaks crowned with eternal snow, the temperature plummets 20 degrees in less than an hour. It's March, but here, at nearly 3,000 meters above sea level, March still belongs to winter with a ferocity that forgives no mistakes. Mikhail Sokolov knows these mountains like few others. Every trail hidden beneath compacted snow, every ravine where the wind howls with a phantom's voice, every natural shelter carved by centuries of storms. For 15 years, he has lived in this remote region of Kyrgyzstan, documenting the wildlife that insists on surviving where most humans wouldn't last 3 days. His shelter is a solid construction of timber and stone, half buried into the mountainside for protection against winds that can rip off roofs and topple century-old trees. This afternoon, he returns from a 2-day expedition tracking snow leopards, his steps sinking into fresh snow that fell during the previous night, when something on the path makes his heart stop. A small golden form against the infinite white. Motionless, nearly imperceptible except for the contrast of colors. Mikhail approaches slowly, and what he sees defies all logic for someone who spends his life studying animals in their natural habitats. It's a lion cub, can't be more than 3 months old, curled against an ice-covered rock, eyes half closed, fur soaked, and beginning to freeze into tiny crystals. Lions don't exist in these mountains. Never have. Their natural habitat lies thousands of kilometers away, in African savannas or the last reserves of India. The presence of this animal here, abandoned, dying, can only mean one thing. Illegal wildlife trafficking, some criminal operation gone wrong, someone who discarded living cargo when authorities closed in or when the cub became too sick to be worth the risk. Mikhail feels rage boiling beneath his layers of thermal clothing, but there's no time for rage now. The thermometer attached to his backpack reads minus 27 degrees Celsius, and with each passing minute, the temperature drops further. He removes his thick gloves, places his bare hands on the small body of the cub, and barely feels any warmth. The heart still beats, weak but present, a small stubborn light refusing to extinguish. Mikhail opens his goose-down coat, lifts his wool sweater, and places the cub against his own skin, feeling the shock of cold penetrating to his bones. The small lion doesn't react, doesn't whimper, doesn't move. It's beyond consciousness, navigating the threshold between life and death where the body shuts down functions one by one to preserve the essential. Mikhail closes the coat again, creating a pocket of human warmth around the animal, and begins to walk. His shelter is 8 kilometers from here, a distance he normally covers in 2 hours, but now, with the extra weight and the need to keep the cub warm, it will take much longer. The sky is turning deep gray, harbinger of snow, and he knows he cannot stop. The first 3 kilometers are the hardest. His muscles protest the doubled effort, the heavy backpack swaying on his back while he keeps one hand pressed against the bulge beneath his coat, checking if there's still breathing. Every 500 meters, he stops briefly, opens a gap in the coat, and blows warm air over the cub's head, trying to heat the air around the small muzzle. Snow begins to fall, large heavy flakes that stick to his eyebrows and beard, accumulating on his shoulders. The wind increases, coming from the north, bringing the metallic scent of storms forming over Lake Issyk-Kul. Mikhail knows this scent, this specific wind that announces blizzards that can last days. He quickens his pace, forcing his legs to move faster even when his lungs burn and his vision begins to blur at the edges. When he finally spots the dark silhouette of his shelter emerging from the increasingly dense whiteness, it's almost completely dark and the storm has arrived with full force. He stumbles to the door, unlocks it with fingers so numb he can barely hold the key, pushes the heavy wood and staggers inside. The interior of the shelter is cold, but compared to outside, it's like entering an embrace. Mikhail lights the oil lamp with trembling hands, then goes straight to the wood stove he always keeps prepared for emergencies. Within minutes, flames begin to crackle, casting golden light across the timber walls while heat starts to spread through the 50 square meter space that serves as his home, laboratory, and sanctuary. Only then does he carefully remove the cub from inside his coat. The small body is limp, the breathing so shallow it's almost undetectable. Mikhail wraps the animal in his thickest wool blanket, then in a sleeping bag rated for -40 degrees, creating layers of insulation. He places the bundle near the stove, close enough to feel the warmth, but not so close that the sudden temperature change could cause shock. Then he heats water, not too hot, just warm, and using a dropper from his medical kit, he begins to place drops on the cub's tongue, one every few seconds, patient as a monk at prayer. Most of the water dribbles out, but some goes down. It's enough. It has to be enough. The first night is a vigil. Mikhail doesn't sleep, sitting cross-legged beside the small bundle, feeding the stove every hour to maintain constant temperature, continuing the water drops, eventually mixing in electrolytes from packets meant for human consumption during mountain emergencies. Outside, the storm rages with the fury of something alive and vengeful. Wind screaming against the walls, snow piling against the windows until only darkness remains visible. The cub's breathing stabilizes around 3 in the morning, becomes slightly deeper, more regular. Around dawn, when pale gray light begins to filter through gaps in the storm clouds, Mikhail sees the small chest rising and falling with something closer to normal rhythm. And for the first time in 12 hours, he allows himself to believe the animal might survive. By the second day, the cub opens its eyes. They're golden brown, still clouded with weakness, but aware, focusing on Mikhail's face with that intense feline gaze that seems to look straight through skin and bone into something deeper. Mikhail has prepared a mixture of warm goat milk. He keeps powdered milk for emergencies, with a little honey and a crushed vitamin tablet. Using a makeshift bottle fashioned from a plastic syringe with a needle removed, he coaxes the cub to drink. The first attempts are clumsy, milk spilling everywhere, but instinct eventually takes over, and the small mouth begins to suckle with increasing strength. The sound of that feeding, the tiny smacking noises and small growls of satisfaction, fills the shelter with something Mikhail hasn't felt in years of solitary existence. The presence of another living being entirely dependent on his care, trusting him with the most fundamental act of survival. The storm lasts 4 days. For days during which Mikhail and the cub exist in a bubble of forced intimacy, the outside world reduced to howling white noise while inside, life reasserts itself in small increments. The cub gains strength hour by hour, first lifting its head, then standing on wobbly legs, then taking tentative steps across the wooden floor, exploring this strange warm cave with growing curiosity. Mikhail watches the animal's personality emerge, playful but cautious, curious but respectful, fierce in tiny bursts of energy followed by sudden collapse into exhausted sleep. He names the cub Zura, after an old Kyrgyz word meaning golden one, though he knows better than to grow attached. This animal cannot stay here. Leos belong in sanctuaries with proper care, veterinary attention, and eventually, if possible, reintroduction to protected habitats far from these frozen mountains. On the 5th day, the storm breaks. The silence is almost shocking after days of constant wind. And when Mikhail opens the door, he confronts a world transformed into pure geometry of white and blue. Every surface draped in snow so deep it reaches his thighs. His solar-powered satellite phone, charged during brief moments of sun between storm waves, finally gets enough signal for him to make contact with the Wildlife Conservation Network in Bishkek. They're astonished by his report, confirm they'll send a helicopter as soon as weather permits landing in a mountain zone, probably within 3 days. They already have reports of a trafficking bust near the Chinese border where several exotic animals were recovered. The cub was likely lost or abandoned during that operation. There's a sanctuary 200 kilometers south, near the Uzbekistan border, specializing in big cats rescued from illegal trade. Zara will go there, live with others of her kind, receive proper care. Mikhail knows this is right, the only ethical choice. But as he watches Zara play with a rolled-up sock, pouncing on it with exaggerated ferocity before tumbling sideways in kitten clumsiness, he feels an unexpected heaviness in his chest. 3 more days together. He uses them to continue strengthening the cub, increasing food portions, encouraging movement and play to rebuild muscles weakened by near death. He photographs everything, documents every detail for the sanctuary staff. He talks to Zara constantly, his voice filling the shelter with words the animal doesn't understand but responds to anyway. The tone and rhythm soothing, establishing connection that transcends species. The helicopter arrives on a crystalline morning when the sky is so blue it hurts to look at directly. 2 rangers and a veterinarian descend, professional and kind, examining Zara with expert hands, declaring her recovery remarkable given the circumstances. They have a specialized transport crate lined with soft blankets, temperature-controlled for the journey. When Mikhail places Zara inside, the cub looks at him with those golden eyes, and he swears he sees something there. Recognition, perhaps, or gratitude, though he knows better than to anthropomorphize too much. He closes the crate door, steps back, watches the helicopter lift off, become a dark speck against infinite blue, then vanish. The silence that follows is absolute. Weeks pass. Mikhail returns to his routines, tracking snow leopards, documenting bird migrations, recording temperature fluctuations and snowmelt patterns. The shelter feels larger somehow, emptier, though nothing physical has changed. He receives updates from the sanctuary. Zara is thriving, gaining weight, socializing with other rescued cubs. The photos they send show a healthy young lioness beginning to display the grace and power of her species. Mikhail is genuinely happy for her, relieved she survived, grateful his intervention made a difference. He files the experience away as one of the most extraordinary of his career, a story he'll someday share. He thinks it's over. Then comes the night that changes everything. It's late November, the heart of early winter, when darkness arrives at 4 in the afternoon and doesn't lift until nearly 9 the next morning. Mikhail is preparing dinner, lentil soup with dried vegetables, when he hears it, scratching. Slow, deliberate scratching on the wooden door. His first thought is snow leopard, perhaps emboldened by hunger, though that would be unusual. He grabs his flashlight, opens the door cautiously, and his breath catches. A full-grown lioness stands in the snow less than 3 meters away. Even in his shock, Mikhail's trained eye catalogs details. Young adult, maybe 3 years old, blood matted in her fur along the left flank, a deep gash visible even in the dim light from his doorway, limping slightly on the front left leg. But it's the eyes that freeze him in place. Those golden brown eyes, now larger, set in a mature face marked by hardship, but still unmistakable. Zara, it's impossible. The sanctuary is 200 kilometers away across some of the most rugged terrain in Central Asia. But those eyes don't lie. Neither does the way the lioness sits, despite obvious pain and exhaustion, and waits. Doesn't threaten, doesn't approach, just waits, looking at him with an expression he's never seen in a wild animal. Expectation, trust, and something that looks heartbreakingly like hope. Mikhail's mind races through impossibilities, trying to become possible. She must have escaped or been released, traveled unimaginable distances, following some instinct or memory he can't begin to understand. She's injured, likely from crossing territory belonging to other predators or from falls in treacherous mountain passes. She found her way here, to this specific shelter to him. The scientist in Mikhail knows this shouldn't happen, that big cats don't form these kinds of bonds, don't return to humans who briefly cared for them months ago. But the human in him, the part that sat up 4 nights feeding drops of water to a dying cub, knows exactly what's happening. Zara remembers. As she came home, he opens the door wider. Zara rises slowly, limps forward, and enters the shelter as if she never left. The wound on her flank is serious, but not critical, likely a week old and already beginning to heal, though infection is a risk. Mikhail's emergency medical training, meant for humans but adaptable, kicks in. He cleans the wound with bottled water and disinfectant, applies antibiotic ointment from his extensive first aid supplies, fashions a loose bandage from clean cloth. Zara tolerates all of this with remarkable patience, occasionally growling softly, but never threatening, her eyes never leaving his face. When he's finished, he prepares food, dried meat rehydrated in warm water, mixed with rice and what vegetables he has, and Zara eats like she hasn't had a proper meal in days, which she probably hasn't. That night, as another storm builds outside and the temperature drops to minus 35 degrees, Zara lies near the wood stove while Mikhail sits at his small desk, satellite phone in hand, facing the most complicated decision of his conservation career. He should call the sanctuary, report this, arrange another extraction. But as he watches the lioness's sides rise and fall in peaceful sleep, as he remembers the impossibility of her journey and the trust in her eyes, he realizes something has shifted in his understanding of what conservation means, what connection means, what responsibility means when a wild animal chooses you not once but twice. The storm outside builds into one of the worst blizzards in a decade, wind speeds reaching 100 kilometers per hour, visibility reduced to zero. But inside the shelter, man and lion exist in their small island of warmth and light, an impossible partnership forged in extremity and sealed in something neither of them has words for, but both understand perfectly. Mikhail will make the call in the morning, do the responsible thing, follow protocols. But tonight, as Zara's soft breathing fills the space and outside the wild world demonstrates its infinite power, he allows himself to sit with the profound strangeness and beauty of this moment. A human and a lioness, survivors both, sheltering together in the heart of winter's fury, connected by threads of fate and choice that defy every logical explanation. Tomorrow will bring decisions, responsibilities, conversations with authorities who won't understand. But tonight, there is only this, the crackle of fire, the howl of wind, and the quiet miracle of trust between species, tested once and offered again, in the darkness where survival and connection become the same thing, indistinguishable and essential as breath itself.